Hi everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Director of Events and Project Management for Vineyard Worship. We release a new single on the first Friday of every month. God of Rest, Dios del Descanso is Vineyard Worship's first monthly single of 2020. This bilingual worship song, penned in both Spanish and English, features songwriter Tina Cologne Williams on vocals.
Vengo a adorarte, vengo a cantarte, vengo a decirte, eres mi Dios, Dios poderoso, Dios del descanso. Mientras cantamos, aquí tú estás. You are the one who sees all our need. You are the one who provides. You are the peace that our souls receive. En ti podemos descansar.
Find God of Rest, Dios del Descanso, and all of our singles wherever you listen to music.
Hunger is the soil that intimate worship grows out of. Now, intimacy would be a classic name for what, especially us in the Vineyard would say, is maybe our hallmark value in worship is intimate worship, connected worship, vertical language, all that sort of thing. What I think was being uncovered for me in this is the idea that there's a precursor state of heart. It just doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes from a place of hunger. The immediate takeaway for me in that is like, if I'm feeling like I'm lacking in my relationship with God, the place to lean into is hunger. Like, how hungry am I? And how I can kind of lean into that and pray into that whole idea of being.
And just becoming aware of how connected am I to the idea that I need God.
Right.
Right. And how awake am I to all of those ideas, right?
Sure, right.
Yeah.
I think this is a particularly challenging idea these days because I don't know how often we feel hungry.
The Ferment.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. This is Casey Corum, producer of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. On this episode, we have another installment in our conversation series. Today, Adam and I are discussing our kingdom values in worship based around 4 words: hungry, humble, human, and home. This was a great conversation digging into the why underneath the how of our worship expression. This is one you're not going to want to miss.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hey, what up, everybody? Adam here, and I finally have Casey Corum on the podcast.
What?
It's only taken me a year.
Well, you know, I'm on the podcast anyway.
I know. We hear from you every single day.
That's right.
Or every single Monday, I should say.
That's right.
Depending on how you're approaching it.
People don't listen every day.
Well, you know, they can listen every day for 56 or 7 days in a row.
Then you go around again.
That's right.
Again.
Keep going.
Yeah.
No, hey, Case, this is what I was hoping we could do. File this under our conversation series.
Sure.
Because I know you've been teaching some kingdom values for worship leaders. And I was hoping we could have that conversation.
Yep.
And maybe just pick that up and unpack it for a bit.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Why don't we do that? Let's just jump right in. Why don't you give us the 4 values of a kingdom worship leader, and then maybe we could just walk through them a little bit.
Sure. Well, I mean, being that we come from a vineyard tradition,
yes,
we have a very developed theology and practice of worship. So before I get into the words we're using to describe what I think lives as kingdom values for worship leaders, just as we've kind of moved down this modern worship road for however long it's been, 30, 40 years now.
Yeah.
I think we need to remember that we sort of found our way into this thing. So I think sometimes as we start to lay out a set of values, it can come across like we had some great idea that we're trying to impose.
Oh yeah, this is great.
Yeah. So the thing I've been saying lately is these are words we're using to describe rather than prescribe. So we're not coming at something with some great idea that we're trying to implement. We're actually trying to unpack what we're noticing and what we're experiencing in the context of engaged worship and engaged worship leading.
I think that's really brilliant, and it's an important distinction because I've actually been thinking about this in another realm or another domain. For instance, about 5 years ago, after Sam Yoder had written All Things Rise,
Yeah.
which is, it's not a normal worship song.
Right.
It's really a hymn. And we don't really have those in the vineyard.
Right.
But after 40 years of vineyard practice, after 40 years of maybe walking out vineyard theology or vineyard expression, at that point, then the distillation of really the sung theology of the vineyard gets, I'll use the word, air quotes here, canonized in this form, right?
Right.
And even scripturally, Paul, he writes the book of Romans at the end of his life, So it's not like, and I just sort of like that approach of what we're taking here. These are just things we've noticed.
Right.
Rather than saying, well, this is how you do it, kids, or this is how it has to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, these are some things we've noticed.
And I think with that, there hopefully is an openness for things to grow and develop rather than, fit things into narrow boxes. So, so here are the 4. They're all H's, being very pastorally with these 4 values here. So the 4 values are hungry,
yes,
humble, human, and home, or another way to say that is family. So those are the 4.
Those are the 4. Well, let's just unpack it.
Yep. So
let's start with the first one.
It's hungry.
Yeah.
So for me, this has a very direct tie to the roots of vineyard worship. So I've had the privilege of leading worship in the vineyard. I mean, I came to faith in the vineyard. So you cut me and I bleed grape juice is the cliche joke about all that. So I've been around the vineyard since the 80s. And I've been in dialogue with loads of people that were there at the very beginning. And I was on staff at the Anaheim Vineyard for 5 years. And kind of the beginnings of this for me, this idea of hunger, came from a conversation that one of our leaders had with Carol Wimber, wife of John Wimber, founder of the Vineyard, talking about the original marching orders of the Anaheim Vineyard. And as you extrapolate, the original marching orders for the Anaheim Vineyard can certainly be upscaled to this is what the vineyard is about, and certainly this is what worship in the vineyard should look like. So, so essentially, and this story has been told on other episodes of the podcast. Should refer back to Carol's interview and Bob and Penny Fulton's interview in particular, Carl Tuttle's interview. These were folks that were leaders in the Friends Church in the Yorba Linda, California area, and self-described, burned out, bitter, caustic, unhealthy, people that had, that taught the Bible, tired people, and just wondered where God was in the whole thing. So they backed off from all of this ministry stuff, and they started this little group there. We just need to find God. We need to find life in this thing again. In the early 70s, they were meeting in this house, and they had these weird constraining rules around what they would do. Because they were Bible teachers, they didn't want anybody to teach them the Bible, because they taught the Bible. So we're not here to teach the Bible to each other, because we're done with that for now.
Yeah.
And if you want prayer, you can only ask for prayer for yourself. So they were kind of like drawing these boundary lines around, like, okay, we know we don't want this. We know we do want that. And they just were desperate, hungry people. So out of that Bible study came these encounters with the Holy Spirit, because there was a lot of just room given to sung prayers, sung worship songs, and even noticing little things like things that have become staples of the modern worship movement, like vertical language, language that's to God rather than about God. They noticed there was a shift in the room when they sang to God rather than about God. So one of the things that struck me in this is, as Carol was sort of unpacking the very beginning marching orders for the Vineyard, is she said, we were hungry and desperate for God. And in the moment, I felt like the Lord said, hunger is the soil that intimate worship grows out of. Now, intimacy would be a classic name for what, especially us in the Vineyard, would say is maybe our hallmark value in worship is intimate worship, connected worship, vertical language, all that sort of thing. So what I think was being uncovered for me in this is the idea that there's a precursor state of heart, that this intimate, it just doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes out from a place of hunger.
Yeah.
So for me, like the immediate takeaway for me in that is, like, if I'm feeling like I'm lacking in my relationship with God, the place to lean into is hunger. Like, how hungry am I, and how I can kind of lean into that and pray into that whole idea of being.
And just becoming aware of how connected am I to the idea that I need God.
Right.
Right. And how awake am I to all of those ideas, right?
Sure, right.
Yeah.
I think this is a particularly challenging idea these days, because I don't know how often we feel hungry. Maybe this is a North American problem. So we're food's all around us. Like we're constantly,
we're gorged on everything.
We're gorged on everything. Social media, like we're never bored. We're never hungry. We're never in want or in need or in lack. If we want to numb that, we can. So. Yeah, that's a small aside, but...
No, I think that's an important aside. I mean, it actually invites us to ask the question that maybe, at least on the surface, appears very disconnected from lots of things that's happening in our life. So I'm just imagining a person, maybe me or anybody who's listening to this podcast, we all have something, or maybe an issue in our life, or we just have seasons in our life where things are not going particularly well. And we tend to use other things to medicate those pains or the discomfort, right? Mm-hmm. Not realizing that maybe what's really at the bottom, it isn't the thing I think it is. Maybe it's a hunger for God, and I'm, but to use your language, we're not hungry. We got food, we got entertainment, we got internet, we've got movies, we've got streaming, we got everything. And so it just anesthetizes the real thing, or it covers up the real thing.
Right.
And maybe what I'm kind of hearing in this is an invitation for us to really get to know what's happening in our life, and to go, maybe the thing that's under all the things is a hunger for God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. A little sideline to that in our worship language is not to miss the point of what they were actually saying in this, because we're both songwriters, so we like to play with language. So when we say they were hungry and desperate for God, this wasn't just like a journey to find a cool way to say something extreme about the love of God. These were people that were actually, they would describe themselves as bitter and burned out and tired, not like more intense. They were in touch with their lack rather than pressing into some sort of intensity. Yeah,
that's important, especially for us songwriters, because worship language has gotten more intense, hasn't it? And we're always looking for something fresh to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a small story. I borrow a story from friends. That's what I do. Friend of ours, Marie Barnett. Yeah. This to me gets really close to what this looks like in sung worship and actually in worship songwriting. So just to cut to the chase, the song Breathe, which is probably one of the most well-known Vineyard worship songs in the world. So classic song all over the world. So Marie was a dance teacher, worked for this dance studio. The owner of the dance studio dies tragically. And then Marie is asked to lead worship at this guy's funeral. And in the middle of leading worship in this time where people are confused and they're angry, don't know where to go next, and they're devastated, spontaneously comes out this song, Breathe, and I'm desperate for you and I'm lost without you. You're the air I breathe. These moments, what I love about that story is that song is coming out of real desperation and real hunger and real brokenness. Yeah. Not like some quick turn of phrase or some interesting, not that playing with language is bad, but to me, that's as close as it gets to that kind of guttural hunger for, God, if you don't come now, we might die.
Yeah, or we just don't have any answers.
Yeah.
I have no solution. I have nothing that can cover this up or fill this up. I mean, Casey, let's just maybe riff or think further here. You've already said it, and I totally agree. We so rarely experience hunger. We have 1,000 ways to medicate. We have 100 ways to keep ourselves covered or to keep ourselves from really doing or being aware of who we really are and what we really need. What can we do to engender hunger? Have you found ways to grow hunger or to just get in touch with that thing?
Well, one of the things that comes straight to mind is trying to get in touch with where you're basically at in life, rather than just sort of playing nice or playing church. And that's sort of, maybe it's a self-awareness play, where you're just, and this might be an argument for deeper levels of community and deeper levels of, honesty in marriage relationships and these sorts of things, where you actually, sometimes we need to ask others how we're actually doing, especially depending on your Enneagram number, I guess. But so I think there's an element of community. I think community actually can push us. There's that axiom that says you're the sum total of your 5 closest friends. So there's some of those sorts of things involved as well. Yeah. The first thing that came to mind, which is a super obvious on the nose thing, is something as simple as just taking time out to maybe take an extended fast. Like if we feel like we're disconnected from hunger, which I think in general, I think I usually am. I think a lot about food in this fitness zone that I've been in for the last 5 years. I lost a bunch of weight a couple of years ago. But actually being in touch with being hungry might be a starting point, just being literally hungry, just finding yourself what does it mean to get in touch with a place of need?
Hello everyone, Adam here. Wanted to break into our conversation really quickly just to remind you of our Sing Together conference that's happening this March 26, 27, and 28 in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the first national worship conference that we have hosted in the Vineyard for over 20 years, and for that reason, we are really, really excited. It's always great to have everybody in the room at the same time. I found that special things happen when we're all together. Anyhow, some of our best friends are going to be there. Eleanor Mumford is coming to speak to us. Dee Wilson from Common Hymnal is going to be there. I'm going to be there. And then we have some other friends that we're going to release here in a few weeks who are joining us as well. We're getting all the details settled. And the thing for you to do today is to sign up, because space is very limited. Lots of people have already registered, and that limited space has become even more limited. So why not go on to vineyardworship.com today and sign up, because I would really, really love to have you in the room. All right, peace. I think you're right. I'm also just reminded of Jesus' words in John 6. I am the bread of life.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus just says it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. You can't live on regular bread.
Right.
You gotta come to this other thing. And so, yeah, maybe that's not a bad practice.
Right.
I'll tell you this, it's utterly foreign to most American practiced Christianity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, when you fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe there's something there for us. Love that.
Yeah. I also think there's room to kind of go back to the phrase that's coming to mind is going back to old wells. Many times when I find myself disconnected or dry or just, wondering what happened, is because I stepped away from some sort of home base or some sort of even simple things like spending time with my guitar in a place of open worship to God. Like it's a simple thing, but it's easy to kind of just to forget simple practices like that.
Yeah, or it's just easy for your day to fill up with other things.
Sure,
yeah.
Right.
Love it.
Yep.
Love it. Let's go to the next one.
Next one is humble.
Humble.
So that's a very Bible word, humility.
Yeah.
So that's hard to argue on that one. Although, I think we can kind of fight against some cliche definitions of humility being sort of like self-dishonoring, I guess. Mm-hmm. I'll talk about one popular idea about the job of the worship leader, and then later on I'll throw rocks at it from a different angle.
Yes.
So one of the tried and true models for what it means to be a worship leader comes from John the Baptist. When John's disciples were coming to him and saying, Jesus is baptizing more people than you, and what are you going to do about that? You have ministry competition now. And John says, when the bridegroom appears, the friend of the bridegroom rejoices, he must become greater, I must become less. So that's the classic definition of what it means to be a worship leader, where the phrase has been used, the invisible worship leader. To quote Chris Wimber, former general manager of Vineyard Worship, he would say, you lead them to the throne and then you get out of the way. Okay, again, I'm going to throw rocks at that in a little bit, but I think there's definitely some truth there in the sense that we live in a culture that when people walk into our church gatherings, they see a stage, they see lights, there's a darkened audience. It's a concert modality. And the social contract in that world is the band performs and the audience applauds at the end of the song.
Yeah, you listen. You're there to enjoy.
Yeah, so it's not about the show. It's not about the leader. It's really about, the phrase has been used, the audience of one. So like we're there for God, not for us. So that's the lead people to the throne and get out of the way. I always think this has something to speak to the idea of, like, I'm not against the idea of music being good or music being excellent or cool or something like that. But there's something about music that is just sort of distractions and music that's self-indulgent music that's kind of in the way, whether that's, some of the simple things that can be picked on sometimes as extended instrumental sections or maybe vocal embellishments that
no one can follow.
No one can follow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, the idea of kind of like accessibility and making room and giving on-ramps for normal people to come along with you and participate. Yeah. So there's also, I think, built into this idea of humble or humility, that it's not just about us building our own platform or ministry. We're giving away the stage. You could even lean into things like younger people, older people. I think there's a place of deference when we talk about humility that also can kind of lean into people of other cultures and other languages that aren't necessarily our thing or preference exactly, but in humility, we serve others and we give room to other voices and other expressions that may or may not be our thing.
That's right. Well, and there's even a person who's here at this retreat. By the way, we're at a SoCal Worship Leaders Retreat. Terry Butler, he just demonstrates this so well. Terry brought all these young people with him, and he's just giving the platform away to them.
Right.
Right. And Zoe led so beautifully last night. Mm-hmm. Terry's been working with her and raising her up. And in order to do that, he has to, by definition, get rid of some portion of his own platform and make it available to her and to other people,
That's right.
And the same thing happened to me. People gave me platform and I had no business being there at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then they just kept extending it. So I love that definition of humble that isn't just, I'm a worm, but it is, that's tilted towards okay, we're here for God. And then also just as worship leaders, especially as people who are maybe on staff or, have the official position, part of what it means to be humble is to use whatever platform we have and give it away to other people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and you brought up an interesting example in that I think when we extend the platform to others, there's a handful of dynamics in there. They may be much more green than you, where you need to just help that along. And you might be able to do it better. You might be able to run circles around them, but yet you're making room and you're bringing them along. Or maybe they're better than you.
Yeah, that's another thing, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because there's some young bucks who are actually pretty amazing kind of day one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that, that's brave. There's some nobility in raising up somebody who's you're teaching and you're mentoring. It's brave to give somebody the platform who's markedly better than you, and that, Saul killed his thousands, David killed his tens of thousands sort of moment.
That's right.
So
that's right. Let's go human.
I think currently this might be my favorite one. So Irenaeus said, the glory of God is a man fully alive. And I think one of the dangers of how we've interpreted humility and the invisible worship leader is we've devalued our own humanity and actually we've devalued who God has actually made us to be. So I think God calls us as who we are, not as just sort of like interchangeable worship leader cog units. And I think God is glorified in us fully embodying who we are, and whether that's our voices or our songwriting or our worship leading. So we're not a carbon copy. We're not, I think we can be inspired, and there's certainly stuff to be learned from emulating examples of people we admire and people we're touched by their ministry or their style of singing or their style of songwriting. I think there's certainly things to be learned from that. Yeah. But that's just the beginning of the whole process of us kind of finding our way in to being that God-designed, unique person. And we're being robbed ourselves. We're actually robbing the body of Christ from something that God has given as a gift to the body of Christ by us not fully taking that spot. So,
yeah, and Casey, this human note for me is deeply, deeply connected to the first two notes. Mm-hmm. It's deeply connected to hunger and even to the idea of humility. To be a human, or to be a person, or to not self-flagellate our own humanity, mm-hmm. but to realize, no, it bears the image of God.
Right.
Yes. There's this sense in which people are hungry beings. To be maybe a kingdom worship leader isn't to say, well, no, I don't have any needs, or to be disconnected from the actual circumstances of our daily lives, mm-hmm. or that good worship is putting on a happy face, or stirring up the opposite of how I feel in every single moment.
Right.
Because some of those moments, not only are they keeping us separated from something like hunger, which is an intrinsically human reality, right, but it's also doubly divorcing us from our humanity, because who doesn't have needs?
Right.
And who doesn't have seasons of their life that they're broken, or
right.
And how in the world could we really block all of that off from God? Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I think this is a really important note, and I think it's really important how it connects to these other ideas, because I see, especially a lot in modern worship, I see a industry that is building towards something that isn't human.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That minimizes people in some mm-hmm. ways. And so I just love this note.
We're singing off the same hymn book here. So, yeah, I think by and large, certainly not everyone's doing this, but there is an element in a lot of the expression of the church's worship in modern worship right now that we're outsourcing and franchising our creativity and our voice. So and even the idea of excellence being so narrowed down to perfect execution of someone else's idea. That is not musical excellence. That is a certain degree of musical proficiency for sure. Yes. But I sure hope that's not excellence. In fact, I actually think, this is a small aside, but to me, excellence is not the goal. Yes, God is worthy. I agree with that. But music is a language, and the purpose of a language is not to speak the language the best. The purpose of a language is to express our hearts.
To be understood.
That's right.
Yeah.
So musical excellence is the beginning of the journey. Our proficiency in music is towards the end of freedom of expressing our hearts to God.
Yeah.
So we're only halfway down the road if we think, well, we're not even halfway down the road if we think excellence is just perfect mimicry.
Yes.
And we're not even halfway down the road if we think excellence is just perfect technical execution of things. Then that comes back to the idea of human. The artists that I think last and the artists that touch my heart are the ones that are embodying who they are.
Yeah.
So, and they're the ones that when they sing something or play something, I believe them.
Yeah.
So to me, that's really the target we're shooting at is when we say things, and we say things in a worship setting, we say them about God or to God. Do we mean them? Do we embody the songs that we sing? Do we embody the songs we write? Do we embody our own instruments and voices?
Well, I love this. And Casey, I just can't help but think of a couple other things right along with this. You know, there's definitely something happening in modern worship right now where more and more people are using stems from the original recorded tracks. Mm-hmm. And again, I just want everybody to know, I don't think that's a sin. No, it's not a sin. I wouldn't even put the label bad on it, right? I would say, though, that if we continually do that, our worship becomes less human because it's, in your words, outsourced.
Right.
Outsourced to what? Well, maybe the original composer, but at least in the immediate setting, it's outsourced to the robots.
Right.
You know, and it maybe separates our own worship community from finding its local, you know, geographic expression.
Right.
Of the sound that only that community can make.
That's right.
You know, and that's been something that's been in my heart from the very first days of being a pastor or worship pastor. I've been obsessed with the idea that every church has a sound, and it's the sound that only that church could make. You know,
right?
Not to be too unicorn or Radio Disney there, but there's something about a group of people that come together. It could only happen with that group of people, and so
that's right.
You know, there's just something happening right now in worship where we're outsourcing arrangements, guitar hooks, and maybe the exact tracks with stems. Which, okay, great, but hopefully we lean into something eventually where we're growing up the people around us,
right,
to be their authentic selves, to bring their true gifts, and to see what happens in the alchemy of a group of people who all bring their true gifts.
Right.
What could happen there?
Right. No, I agree, and I think that I think maybe the softer version of that. I mean, I totally hear the tone of what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think what it is a missed opportunity. So maybe there's an element of convenience in these, you know, just sort of subbing in someone else's creative work to, and I know we, at some level, week in and week out, we're trying to make things happen on a series of levels. So, man, my hope, and I'm a pro technology guy. I live in the studio most days of the week. So to me, these tools, man, if we stop at just outsourcing all this stuff and mimicking this stuff, we're just missing an opportunity. We can use those tools as a springboard to something totally new and original. So anyway, that's...
Well, and then back to the point you made a moment ago about your favorite singers are not always the most clinical technicians. You know, same, you know, like why in the world would somebody like Bob Dylan have the career he's had? It's not because he was the perfect singer.
Right.
Right. Or, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that sort of fit in that category where who they are is actually, it's transcending the Greek Platonic idea of perfection.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think what we're seeing there is we're seeing people that they have made peace with themselves at some level in the creative sense. And when they stand on stage, they are themselves. And so to drill down kind of into our own lives with God in this, the glory of God is a man fully alive, and that fully alive means connected to ourselves and connected to God. When we stand on stage, I always like to say, I like to stand on stage with my feet on the ground. Like I feel like both feet are planted on the ground, and I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm comfortable with the songs I'm singing. I emote. It doesn't mean everything that I'm saying conjures some mass emotion every time, but I mean what I say. And I even think this leans into the idea of stage presence. A while back, that kind of got flipped on its head for me, where the idea of stage presence sort of conjures the image of the show. But really what I think when we're really talking about somebody who has stage presence is somebody who is present on stage. And, again, pushing back against our own modern culture, we're not very present most of the time.
Yeah, we're looking, it's the strangest thing now where you're non-present to the people you're physically sharing space with, and then you're maybe technologically or internet present, sort of people who are a zillion miles away.
Right.
And maybe don't know you at all. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, so it's when we stand in that place, we are fully ourselves, and we're connected to ourselves, connected to God. To me, that's what embodies this idea of being human and being fully present to God. And it's actually, if we're standing in that place, we're standing sure-footed and at rest in ourselves and connected to God, we can serve so much better in that worship setting rather than striving to be something we're not. It's something as simple as just like, it can be as practical as not knowing the lyrics to something, where we're just not, it takes away from it can be also as practical as not trusting our band either. So there's other dynamics there where that kind of get in the way of those sort of sure-footed moments as we lead. So.
The other thing that popped in my brain as we were just having this little talk about a kingdom worship leader as someone who's human is this thought: maybe we shouldn't lead 3 services 52 times a year.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, maybe that would not be good for you.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it would be more human to acknowledge that you need rest and sharing is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Like acknowledging our limitations and maybe being in touch with, something's not quite right. I need to take a step back for a second.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Just leaning into our own humanity. All right, what's number 4?
Number 4 is home, which we started to touch this a little bit in the idea that every church community is a unique assembly of personalities and skill levels and musical voices and all that sort of thing. And one of the ways I like to think about this value is my favorite sort of restaurant is a locally sourced, farm-to-table, unique, one-of-a-kind. If I'm in whatever area of the country I'm in.
Yeah, you've been spending some time in the Central Coast.
Yeah, that is the quintessential farm to table.
Right.
Yeah, you're getting literally everything from within, 20 miles or so. And it's wonderful, first of all. That to me, it's worship ministry with a sense of place, or, like you're a winemaker, so it's worship with a sense of terroir. It's a sound and expression that comes from somewhere and has a context. And even the big songs of the church many times have a very local story. So even these big, we certainly shared the song story of Breathe earlier, but there's any number of songs that when you drill down into the why and the how of where these songs came from, they came from a people that were walking out a very specific set of circumstances personally and as communities that this song gave life and breath to.
Well, a couple of the biggest songs that have been sung around the world in the last few years were written by Jonathan and Melissa Helser.
Uh-huh.
And I can't think of Jonathan and Melissa without thinking of them being North Carolinians.
Right.
And I know they have their worship school or their school for young people called the 18-inch Journey, and it's kind of on a farm,
Right.
Yeah, again, it's the idea of place.
Right.
A particular thing from a particular spot. And the other thing I think about when I'm thinking about home is I'm also thinking a kingdom worship person or a kingdom worship ministry. If it's home, then there's a sense of welcome or hospitality. Mm-hmm. There's a sense of the people who are involved are finding more than just a community, but they're finding hopefully some sense of family and brotherhood or sisterhood.
Yes, right.
Or I think the historic vineyard word would be kinship.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think, well, it's certainly a challenge for us as worship leaders and songwriters and worship musicians to not somehow separate ourselves from the communities that we serve. And by that, I certainly mean the churches we're involved in, but I would actually probably extrapolate that out to the actual towns and cities we live in as well, where we're one of them. We're North Carolinians in the case of the Helsers. So
yes.
Where we embody that sense of place as well. So the things that come out of us feel and sound and engender a specific place. So, and I know this happens in the sermon prep and the teaching world, so much in the life of the worship leader, the Lord speaks and works things in our lives on behalf of the communities we serve. Yeah. And so we need to pay attention to some of that stuff. I think that definitely relates to songwriting, where there are themes and there are issues that the Lord is dealing with us in our own lives that he wants to work out in the context of the people that we serve. But if you're not a songwriter, if you've never done that, but you do put language in people's mouths every week in the curation that you do when you select songs for Sunday morning. Yeah. So it's basically the same thing. What things do these people that you put under my care need to say to God? What are the things that will unlock their hearts? Tell a small story about a worship leader named Paul Balash, a well-known Christian worship leader. One of his practices through the years, while he's preparing for his Sunday worship times, is to actually go into the main sanctuary where he leads worship and turn the PA full on and lead worship and look out over the congregation, the set of empty chairs in the room. And as he's looking out over the chairs, he looks to his left and he sees this is where this young family just had a baby. And then he looks a little bit more towards the center, and this is a family that just lost their mother. Yes. And this is a newlywed couple over here on the right. This family just got a job. This family just lost a job, all that sort of thing. It's just, as you prepare, you're thinking about the faces and the people that you know. And it's, again, we live in a culture where the musician and the singer are on a pedestal kind of from day one, culturally speaking. We have.
Yeah, I don't think we've yet considered what stage lights amplification. It means more than we've ever thought about it meaning.
Right. But it really is a place of service. And if we really think of it from that angle, how are we serving? And maybe we can lean into some of these things, especially with this idea of home. Maybe we can serve our own people well. Maybe leading the latest, like the new song that's coming out, which I have yet to lead, which I'm sure I probably will, is the song Waymaker. Everybody's leading this song now. So yes. Maybe the way to serve your congregation is to add Waymaker to your set next week. Yeah. Or maybe there's something that you can write. Or maybe there's better language that's found in some old hymn or something.
That's right.
But it all comes from this idea of a kingdom worship leader is home. A kingdom worship leader is connected to a people. A kingdom worship leader is connected to a place. A kingdom worship leader is known.
Yes.
Because they are part of a home and a part of a family.
Yeah, and I just want to extrapolate this maybe one step further out too. There's this really beautiful scripture, I think it's Psalm 68. It says, God takes the solitary and he sets them into families. Mm. And I'm just thinking about all the people, it's kind of connected to the Paul Balash story, all the people who are going to be at our churches this next Sunday. Mm-hmm. There are people who are on the fringe. Mm-hmm. Maybe a great way of imagining our kingdom leadership or kingdom worship as home would be the idea of hospitality and setting the room, right? Setting the room and going, okay, is there anything we could sing? Mm-hmm. that would welcome the solitary into the family.
Yes.
Is there anything that we could sing or say or pray this Sunday morning that would take the marginalized and those on the edges and bring them to the center? Is there any way that we could extend a hospitality and a welcome? It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think part of what we've done when we've gone through these 4 things is we've highlighted this really amazing tension where there's, a good portion of our worship leadership, if it's done appropriately, it's connecting people to God, so it's vertical. Mm-hmm. But then it's also horizontal, isn't it?
Right.
Like it's we're here together in this thing.
That's right.
Yeah. We're wanting people to be connected to God, and at the same time we're also looking out and trying to see people and make room in our own church or heart or family for these people.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not about us, so we're humble, but we're not unknown. We're meant to be humble and we're meant to be generous, but we're also meant to be known, and we're meant to be ourselves.
Yeah. Love this. Mm-hmm. Love this. Kingdom worship, or a kingdom worship leader, is hungry, humble, human, home. Anything you want to add to it, Casey?
Probably. That's why I said it's descriptive, not prescriptive. So
I like that.
There's always room to kind of grow the thinking, I think.
Amen.
So.
Amen. Hey, Case, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you about our Sing Together conference in Nashville, Tennessee from March 26th through 28th. It's going to be a great time and we hope to see you there. For more information, go to vineyardworship.com. Also, don't forget to check out our latest single, God of Rest, Dios del Descanso, wherever you listen to music. All right, people. See you next time. Peace.